The following narrative is synthesized from press archives, historical records, and royal news updated through mid-April 2026. Some details regarding media perspectives or unconfirmed palace theories are explored through a multidimensional news lens. Should you find any discrepancies, we welcome your polite and constructive comments below. In the opening months of 2026, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, made two highly anticipated appearances that captured the attention of royal observers worldwide. Stepping onto the BAFTA red carpet in late February and later attending the state banquet for the President of Nigeria at Windsor Castle in March, her sartorial choices spoke volumes. Yet, the true visual centerpiece of these evenings was not a newly acquired gemstone or a modern diplomatic offering. Instead, Catherine reached deep into the historical archives. She chose the magnificent Greville chandelier earrings, the intricate diamond bangle belonging to Queen Mary, and the iconic lover's knot tiara. Simultaneously, in April 2026, Buckingham Palace opened the highly publicized exhibition Queen Elizabeth II, Her Life in Style. Walking through those gilded halls, visitors are met with a curated selection of artifacts that heavily emphasize British-made heritage pieces and centuries-old royal tradition. Observing these recent events, a fascinating question begins to surface. It is not about what is on display, but rather what is conspicuously absent. What has happened to the colossal diamonds of the East? For decades, the royal vaults were frequently replenished with breathtaking, multi-million-pound parures gifted by the monarchs, sultans, and billionaires of the Middle East. There were massive deep blue sapphires from Saudi Arabia, complex networks of emeralds from the Gulf, and incredibly heavy rubies that sparkled under the camera flashes of state dinners and royal tours. These were the ultimate symbols of international wealth, grand gestures of friendship designed to dazzle the world. Yet today, these magnificent, heavy clusters of foreign diamonds seem to have vanished, quietly retreating into the shadows of the royal vaults. This sweeping disappearance is not a mere shift in fashion, nor is it a coincidence. It is the culmination of a decades-long, silent negotiation between the women of the British royal family and the immense weight of global diplomacy. When a royal woman receives a magnificent necklace from a foreign power, she is not simply accepting a decorative accessory, she is receiving a wearable treaty. It is a silent political text, a glittering obligation that she is expected to carry gracefully on her shoulders. For the oil-rich nations of the mid to late 20th century, presenting an entire, matching suite of heavy jewelry was a distinct display of diplomatic power. The unspoken expectation was that the recipient would wear the complete set, transforming herself into a living testament to the giver's immense wealth and influence. However, the royal women who received these gifts did not merely submit to being display cases for foreign diplomacy. What unfolds behind the closed doors of the royal wardrobe is a captivating history of quiet resistance, adaptation, and survival. It is a story that begins with the subtle authority of Queen Elizabeth II and the visual rebellion of Princess Diana, both of whom found ingenious ways to dismantle these lavish gifts, physically altering the stones to assert their own autonomy over the diplomatic narrative. The journey then moves to a different kind of endurance, observing the profound, rigid weight borne by Queen Camilla, who accepted and wore these heavy diplomatic gestures exactly in their original, unyielding forms. It encompasses the bitter modern reality faced by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, where a glittering gift suddenly transformed into an uncontrollable media crisis, proving that jewelry can sometimes be a dangerous political liability. Ultimately, this historical thread leads us directly to the present day, illuminating exactly why Catherine has mastered the most powerful and sophisticated strategy of all, the art of absolute, strategic silence. The absence of these Eastern diamonds today is not a loss of glamour, but a deliberate reclamation of power. Before any act of visual defiance could be orchestrated, the royal women first had to master the delicate art of concession. To refuse a magnificent gift from a strategic ally would be an unthinkable breach of international protocol. The late Queen Elizabeth II understood this implicitly. Throughout the 1960s and 1980s, she gracefully accepted the expectation that she must occasionally wear these massive designs exactly as they were presented. She debuted the intricate 80-carat King Faisal diamond necklace shortly after receiving it in 1967, and later wore the spectacular King Fahd chandelier diamonds presented in 1987. These creations by Harry Winston were masterpieces of mid-century wealth, and the Queen wore them to honor the diplomatic ties they represented. She recognized the necessity of the gesture. She also wielded these gifts with calculated precision. Consider the staggering 6-strand pearl and diamond necklace gifted by the Emir of Qatar in 1979. It was a piece so substantial and overwhelming that it spent decades hidden away in the royal vaults. The Queen did not wear it casually. She brought it out of the darkness only when the diplomatic climate demanded it, most notably for a 2010 state banquet honoring Qatar, perfectly measuring out her diplomatic favor. Even her strict personal stylistic rules were sometimes sidelined for the sake of the crown. She famously disliked tight-fitting chokers, preferring necklaces that rested comfortably below the collarbone. Yet, in 1992, during a state visit to Germany, she broke her own rule to debut a striking, rigid gold and diamond collar featuring distinct Middle Eastern design elements. She bent her own preferences to honor a diplomatic tie, proving that a monarch must sometimes place duty above personal comfort. But compliance was only half of the equation. Where the Queen truly exercised her authority was behind the scenes, aided by the quiet, precise work of the royal jewelers. In 1979, during her tour of the Gulf, she received a spectacular sapphire and diamond suite from Asprey, gifted by the ruler of Dubai. Rather than accepting its heavy, looping structure as a permanent fixture, she took control. She instructed her jewelers to dismantle the necklace, extracting the large sapphire loops to fashion entirely new, smaller drop earrings and a more practical bracelet. This was not merely a matter of personal taste, it was a quiet assertion of sovereignty. By breaking apart the original design, she reshaped foreign ostentation into a reflection of understated, practical British elegance. She ensured that she possessed the gift, rather than allowing the gift to possess her. The jeweler's pliers became an instrument of quiet authority. This instinct to dismantle and reclaim was passed down, but the next generation amplified it into a brilliant art form of visual rebellion. When 19-year-old Princess Diana received a colossal suite of sapphires from Saudi Crown Prince Fahd as a wedding gift in 1981, she was initially overwhelmed by its sheer volume. Yet, she quickly learned to manipulate the deep blue stones to serve her own evolving narrative. She refused to be confined to wearing the matching parure as a heavy, uniform set. Diana famously removed the massive sapphire pendant from the necklace, occasionally replacing it with the historic Prince of Wales feather brooch to create a completely different aesthetic. More creatively, archival research suggests she took the heavy, imposing sapphire watch from the parure and had the face entirely removed, transforming the band into a sleek, dazzling bracelet. She dismantled the expectations of the giver piece by piece. Her most striking maneuver, however, occurred in 1987 during a visit to Germany. For a formal banquet, she chose to wear a fiercely modern, geometric diamond necklace featuring sharp crescent motifs, a gift presented by the Sultan of Oman the previous year. On its own, the necklace was a stark, icy representation of modern wealth. But Diana chose to pair this sharp, diplomatic collar with her family's antique, floral gold Spencer tiara. The visual clash was profound. The soft, romantic curves of her ancestral tiara stood in direct, almost jarring opposition to the sharp, contemporary diamonds resting on her collarbone. Through this brilliant contrast, Diana communicated a powerful, silent truth. She would carry the heavy obligations of the crown's diplomacy around her neck, but the crown upon her head would always represent her own identity, her own roots, and her own inherent freedom. Not every woman who entered the royal institution chose to dismantle these colossal gifts. For some, the strategy, or perhaps the obligation, was to accept and display the complete, staggering weight of these international treaties exactly as they were presented. This brings a different visual reality into focus, one that reveals the true, unyielding rigidity of modern diplomatic exchanges. When Camilla, then the Duchess of Cornwall, undertook an official tour of Saudi Arabia in 2006, she received an unprecedented volume of gems, returning to London with 3 immense parures. The most striking of these was a necklace composed of 37 massive rubies set within a rigid, geometric diamond framework. When she wore the piece in its entirety for a concert in Philadelphia in 2007, royal observers quickly dubbed it the ruby breastplate. The nickname was remarkably apt. Unlike the fluid, adaptable diamonds favored by previous generations, this design sat flat and unbending across the décolletage, acting less like an adornment and more like a ceremonial shield. Looking at the archival photographs from that evening, the sheer density of the stones appears almost overwhelming, seemingly swallowing the wearer beneath a rigid wall of foreign wealth. The necklace dictated the entire physical presence of the woman wearing it, offering no room for personal stylistic translation. It is perhaps telling that this particular ruby armor has rarely, if ever, been seen in public since. This pattern of bearing the full, unaltered burden of diplomatic generosity continued into the next decade. In 2013, she received yet another colossal ruby suite from King Abdullah, designed as a heavy, multi-layered bib of gems. Through a purely objective lens, these appearances illustrate a stark reality. Carrying the raw, unmodified weight of such opulence is an immense physical and visual undertaking, one that leaves little room for the wearer to shine brighter than the stones themselves. As the 21st century progressed, the weight of these Eastern diamonds was no longer measured merely in carats. It began to be weighed against the intense, unforgiving pressure of the modern media landscape. A glittering diplomatic gift could suddenly transform from a symbol of international wealth into a severe public relations liability. The most poignant example of this modern hazard unfolded during the Duchess of Sussex's tour of Fiji in the autumn of 2018. Attending a state dinner, Meghan stepped out wearing a spectacular pair of diamond chandelier earrings by the high-end jeweler Bhutani. Under ordinary circumstances, the cascading diamonds would have simply been admired as a dazzling adornment. However, global news feeds at that exact moment were consumed by the international fallout surrounding the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. When the press identified the earrings as a wedding gift from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a fierce media storm erupted. The incident exposed a harsh, modern truth about the royal jewellery box. The women of the institution can easily become collateral damage in geopolitical crossfire. A pair of diamond earrings can swiftly become a diplomatic poison chalice, forcing the wearer to physically bear the brunt of controversies completely outside her control. This heightened risk is precisely why the palace has increasingly chosen to keep its most ostentatious diplomatic treasures in the dark. The royal vaults are now quietly populated by glittering memories of a bygone era of excess. The substantial ruby suites gifted to Princess Anne in 1987 and to Sarah, Duchess of York, in 1986, have effectively vanished from the public eye. Similarly, the extravagant emerald and sapphire tassel suites are rarely seen in their complete, heavy forms. The institution has recognized that displaying these massive, unyielding symbols of foreign wealth is no longer palatable in an era of economic caution and complex global politics. To parade them now would be a severe miscalculation. Understanding these intense media risks and the heavy visual burdens of the past, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has engineered a masterful shift in how the monarchy handles modern diplomatic gifts. She relies on the most sophisticated weapon available to the modern royal, the power of strategic silence. When Catherine debuted a magnificent floral motif ruby and diamond suite at the Sun Military Awards in 2011, and later a substantial emerald suite at the BAFTAs in 2018, royal watchers immediately recognized the aesthetic. The craftsmanship bore the unmistakable hallmarks of high-end Middle Eastern jewelers like Muawad. She also dipped into the vault's modern Eastern reserves during her tour of Jamaica in 2022, borrowing elements of the emerald tassel suite. Yet, Buckingham Palace remained resolutely tight-lipped about the origins of these personal pieces, issuing only a vague classification of the rubies and BAFTA's emeralds as wedding gifts. This refusal to officially name the wealthy international benefactors is not a clerical oversight. It is a highly calculated shield. By keeping the origins shrouded in deliberate ambiguity, Catherine protects the monarchy's refined image from the complex optics of flaunting multi-million-pound gifts from foreign billionaires. She wears these dazzling pieces fleetingly, a brief, brilliant flash on a red carpet, to offer a subtle, unrecorded nod of gratitude to international allies, before swiftly returning them to the impenetrable darkness of the royal vault. She refuses to allow these anonymous, colossal diamonds to dictate her personal aesthetic or define her royal identity. This calculated distancing explains the profound visual shift observed in the spring of 2026. Rather than relying on the precarious glamour of modern diplomatic gifts, Catherine has firmly anchored her presence in the undeniable safety of the royal family's own history. By exclusively selecting pieces like Queen Mary's diamond bangle or the historic Greville chandelier earrings for the most crucial state events, she draws upon a wellspring of independent internal strength. This is an intentional pivot. The monarchy is projecting stability through its own deeply rooted heritage, stepping away from the glittering but volatile reliance on foreign opulence. It is a visual declaration that the British crown no longer needs to wear the wealth of others to assert its own enduring power. Ultimately, the true supremacy of a royal jewel is not measured by its staggering carat weight, the rigidity of its gold framework, or the political leverage it temporarily commands. The highest elevation a piece of jewelry can achieve occurs only when it successfully sheds its heavy diplomatic armor to become an intimate keeper of family memory. No piece exemplifies this profound transformation more beautifully than the Bahrain pearl drop earrings. Their story began in 1947, not as a rigid political treaty, but as a handful of natural pearls housed within a simple shell, presented by the Hakim of Bahrain to a young Princess Elizabeth on her wedding day. For decades, they moved quietly through the royal generations. Then, more than 70 years later, they emerged with devastating quietude. Catherine chose these exact pearls, paired with stark mourning attire, to stand with bowed head at the funeral of Prince Philip in 2021, and again for the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in 2022. In those moments of profound global silence, a single, luminous pearl easily overpowered the memory of every colossal ruby breastplate and towering diamond collar hidden in the vaults. The political maneuvering, the soft power, and the gilded treaties dissolved entirely. The Eastern gift was no longer an instrument of statecraft. It was a grandchild's tear, a final farewell, and a silent, enduring witness to a lifetime of devotion and the unbroken continuity of a family. The grand diamonds of diplomacy will inevitably retreat into the shadows of history, but the pieces that survive eternity are those that have been quietly, intimately loved. Deep beneath the floors of Buckingham Palace, this quiet separation between statecraft and sentiment is physically maintained. The royal vaults, climate-controlled and heavily guarded, serve as the ultimate resting place for the gifts that prove too heavy to wear. Here, the Saudi sapphires of the 1980s and the rigid ruby collars of the 2000s sit inside their original meticulously catalogued leather boxes. They are no longer considered the personal property of the women who received them. Following strict modern protocols updated over the last decade, these colossal parures are legally classified as part of the royal collection, held in trust for the nation. This bureaucratic classification acts as the final seal on their diplomatic purpose. They are frozen in a state of permanent preservation, stripped of their potential to be dismantled by a pair of jeweler's pliers or remade by a young princess eager to assert her independence. The curators who walk these silent, subterranean aisles treat these Eastern parures with the clinical respect reserved for museum artifacts rather than living jewelry. The sheer volume of wealth stored in these specific sections of the vault is staggering, yet it remains largely untouched by human hands for years at a time. Occasionally, an inventory check will bring the harsh glare of modern LED lighting onto the sharp geometric fringes of the Omani diamonds or the dense, unyielding structure of the ruby breastplate. For a brief moment, the stones catch the light, echoing the extravagant state banquets and high-stakes oil diplomacy of decades past. But the heavy steel doors inevitably close again, plunging the diplomatic treaties back into darkness. This physical isolation mirrors the stylistic choices being made above ground. As the monarchy navigates the complex social and economic realities of 2026, the optics of dragging these immense foreign treasures back into the public eye are simply too precarious. The women of the modern institution understand that true influence now requires a lighter touch. By leaving the heaviest stones in the dark, Catherine and the current generation of royal women are actively rewriting the visual rules of engagement. They have realized that in a world oversaturated with immediate visual consumption and instantaneous media scrutiny, withholding is far more powerful than displaying. This deliberate curation is currently on full display in the April 2026 exhibition, Queen Elizabeth II, Her Life in Style. Walking through the public galleries, one notices exactly how the narrative of royal jewellery is being officially written. The curators have meticulously selected pieces that highlight the late Queen's personal ingenuity and British craftsmanship. The display cases feature the domestic, the historical, and the cleverly adapted. The massive, unaltered diplomatic parures of the Middle East are noticeably absent from the velvet busts. Their exclusion from such a high-profile public retrospective confirms that the palace prefers to remember the women who mastered the stones, rather than the raw financial power of the stones themselves. The jewellery box, once a chaotic theatre of international posturing and personal rebellion, has finally been brought under absolute control. The era of the overwhelming, wall-to-wall diamond parure arriving unexpectedly in a velvet box has effectively ended. What remains is a highly curated, deeply intentional language of heritage. When the heavy doors of the royal vault do swing open today, it is not to retrieve a monument to foreign wealth, but to select a piece of domestic history, a delicate diamond bangle, a familiar pearl drop, a tiara with roots deep in British soil. These are the choices that resonate. They speak of stability, of continuity, and of a family that has learned, through decades of trial and public scrutiny, exactly how to carry the weight of the crown without letting it crush them. The legal classification of these treasures represents a profound institutional shift that occurred quietly behind palace gates. During the 1980s, the lines between personal gifts and state property were notoriously blurred, allowing for a fleeting era of individual autonomy. When Lady Diana Spencer opened her malachite and gold boxes from the Gulf, those staggering sapphires legally became her private property. This absolute ownership is precisely what afforded her the audacious freedom to take a jeweller's tools to a multi-million-pound watch or swap out a massive pendant. She was not dismantling a state asset. She was modifying her own jewellery. Similarly, the striking, serpent-like diamond and ruby demi-parure gifted to Sarah, Duchess of York, upon her marriage in 1986 remains her private possession, a glittering, privately held remnant of a decade characterized by far looser diplomatic regulations. However, as the 21st century approached, the institution recognized the immense vulnerability inherent in allowing individual members to amass such vast, unaccountable personal wealth from foreign entities. The royal rulebook was entirely rewritten and strictly enforced. Today, when a visiting monarch presents a parure of heavy emeralds or cascading diamonds, it never enters the private vanity of the recipient. It is immediately registered on the official gift list, designated as the property of the crown, and held in trust for the nation. This bureaucratic firewall fundamentally alters the wearer's psychological and physical relationship with the stones. They are no longer personal adornments to be cherished or adapted. They are borrowed uniforms of state. This rigid legal reality perfectly explains the visual compliance observed in more recent decades. When the Duchess of Cornwall wore the imposing ruby breastplate in Philadelphia, she did so fully aware that she was merely a temporary custodian. There was no opportunity to break the heavy framework apart or fashion it into a more manageable, delicate design, because the necklace simply did not belong to her. She was wearing a heavily insured state asset. This modern protocol enforces a strict, unyielding visual compliance, transforming the royal woman from an autonomous owner into an obedient curator who must bear the exact weight of the geopolitical treaty placed around her neck. Even Queen Elizabeth II, who technically possessed absolute authority over the royal collection, often chose to navigate these foreign assets with subtle diplomatic geometry rather than brute force. Consider the magnificent swag necklace of cabochon rubies presented to her by the Emir of Qatar during his state visit to the UK in 1985. The piece was undeniably modern, set in rich, heavy yellow gold. Rather than allowing this contemporary Eastern design to dominate her appearance, she engineered a brilliant visual hierarchy. She consistently paired the Qatari necklace with her own historic Burmese ruby tiara. Even though the tiara was crafted from much older stones with a distinctly different aesthetic, the deep red of the rubies bridged the gap. She ensured that the modern foreign gift was always visually anchored by, and ultimately subservient to, a towering piece of deeply rooted royal history. This meticulous balancing act between honoring a foreign ally and maintaining domestic supremacy requires a level of calculation that the modern media landscape has rendered almost impossibly perilous. As the public's tolerance for ostentatious displays of unaccountable wealth plummeted, the safest approach for the institution became absolute immobility. The deepest corners of the royal vault have quietly transformed into a sanctuary for diplomatic excess, a place where the heaviest political obligations are sent to sleep. Yet, even within this strict regime of preservation, there are occasional, carefully measured resurrections. When the sheer diplomatic weight of a piece makes it too perilous for the reigning monarch or the immediate heir to wear, the institution often employs a subtle diversion tactic. They delegate the display of these complex assets to the more peripheral, yet highly trusted, women of the royal family. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, has long served as the monarchy's safest set of hands for this exact purpose. Over the past decade, she has quietly become the primary custodian of the vault's Eastern reserves. In 2012, she wore the intricate King Faisal diamond necklace to a pre-wedding gala in Luxembourg. In 2016, she borrowed the unusual, rigid gold and diamond collar that the late Queen had debuted in Germany in 1992. More recently, she stepped out in the sweeping King Fahd chandelier diamonds for an American state banquet in 2019, and again for the Japanese state visit. By placing these magnificent, foreign-made pieces on a senior working royal who operates just outside the blinding microscopic scrutiny reserved for the Princess of Wales, the palace achieves a brilliant compromise. The diplomatic origins are respectfully acknowledged on an international stage, but the controversial weight of the diamonds is kept at a safe, insulated distance from the direct line of succession. It is a masterful deployment of secondary royal soft power. Through this meticulous choreography of hiding, altering, and selectively delegating, the monarchy has successfully neutralized the overbearing narrative of the Eastern parures. The glittering gifts that were originally designed to command attention and project the absolute power of the giver have been systematically outmaneuvered by the quiet, enduring machinery of the British crown. When we look back at the trajectory of these magnificent stones, we witness a profound evolution of visual language. The journey begins with the absolute submission demanded by the massive, unyielding collars of the mid-20th century. It moves through the brilliant, defiant modifications orchestrated by the late Queen and Princess Diana, who refused to let their identities be overshadowed by the gold they wore. It navigates the heavy, rigid armor endured by Queen Camilla and the treacherous media minefields that trapped the Duchess of Sussex. Finally, it arrives at the absolute, strategic mastery of Catherine, who understands that the most powerful statement a modern royal can make is to leave the most expensive diamonds locked in the dark. Ultimately, the true measure of a jewel's worth is not found in the depths of a foreign mine, nor is it calculated by the billions of dollars it represents in a diplomatic exchange. The heavy, geometric breastplates and the cascading diamond fringes will forever remain artifacts of statecraft, cold and impressive monuments to the geopolitical maneuvering of a specific era. They are treaties forged in platinum, and like all treaties, their relevance will inevitably fade with the passing of time. The pieces that truly survive the relentless march of history are those that manage to shed their political armor entirely. They endure not because of their financial dominance or their imposing carat weight, but because they have been absorbed into the quiet, intimate fabric of human emotion. Long after the oil wealth has shifted and the diplomatic handshakes have been forgotten, it is the unassuming, deeply loved heirlooms, the simple pearls of mourning, the inherited bangles, the worn gold of ancestral tiaras that remain. They stand as the silent, unyielding witnesses to a family's survival, proving that while foreign wealth can buy the largest diamonds in the world, it can never buy the enduring, quiet power of history.